Sometimes privilege leads to disaster. Tonight, we will read a horror story by Stephen Sinclair, Shuddermaw. Jack was a success at everything he did, always had been. As a child, he'd been the first in his class to learn to tie his shoelaces and to tell the time. He did everything well, comfortably ahead of the bell curve academically, but not to the extent that he had been thought weird by his peers. He was good-natured and well-intentioned, but still capable of an appropriate amount of healthy boyish naughtiness and hijinks. He was popular. People liked him. Jack had a hard-to-define charm and an easygoing manner. Jack was also successful in his chosen career. He was an engineer. Like most successful people, Jack was deeply spiritual, although like nearly all such people, he would have been deeply perplexed by anyone who pointed this out, perhaps laughed. The nature of his belief, of course, was never conscious. It could be described briefly as this: things are this way because they should be this way and must be this way. The person who's effortlessly dexterous and creative, good with his or her hands, knows consciously that they have good coordination, good common sense, and so on. But deep down, they subscribe, with all their strength, to the real wellspring of good things. Things are this way because they should be this way and must be this way. Good-looking people who are successful with people of their choice are often followers of this cult. It exists all over the world and always has. Like all its practitioners, Jack was the true believer and didn't know he was. A formidable faith made more formidable because it's invisible, safely unarticulated, and always springs from real things, the abilities and good, or at least desirable to others, qualities of its disciples. Although it's a complete and utter delusion, it was much stronger than any conscious mysticism, which is often a sop to take the place of qualities the proponent lacks. During his life, Jack had, like everyone else, encountered difficulties and problems. But these were not like those encountered by people who habitually struggle, who fail all the time. Jack's problems and hard times were all episodic. There was the normal rolling in huge fields of continuous crop of success and happiness, and here and there a few jagged boulders of hard times and sad times, poking up through as exceptions. Because he had coped with these, he thought he had character. The worst thing he had been through was his father's sudden death when he was a student in the mid-90s. This, of course, was a huge tour of a boulder. He'd been genuinely devastated and grief-stricken. Of course, that was a genuine disaster. Of course, what was a genuine disaster would have been a complete catastrophe if he'd been another type of boy. If the other lads had not all wanted to be his friends, if he hadn't been successful in his happy, forthright, almost offhand way with girls, if his family hadn't been middle class, there was a lot of insurance money. He was able to get on the housing ladder when he was still a student, and stay on ever since. His fundamentally naturally high abilities helped him get his degree. He also fit in to the era of cool Britannia like a hand in a glove. As another type of boy, the grief would have been the same and unmitigated. He would have also have been carrying other types of damage already. He could never have seen or accepted this. He would have got deeply offended. He would have used his two biggest condemnations: people who just don't make the most of their lives, and the ultimate: some people are just beyond help. In this regard, he was a bit like those middle-class writers who fail to portray poverty in Western countries in any convincing way because they've never experienced the low-key misery of meals always off trays, or the eternal never-ever, the frustration of always just enough. If this sounds brutal, it is because it is. But like any creed, things are this way because they should be this way and must be this way, offers consolation of more than one kind. As a belief, it is, of course, a lie. It makes no more sense than, all is for the best in the best of all possible worlds. In common with most British people, Jack didn't believe in God or go to church. Nevertheless, like people like himself all over the world, he believed himself to be chosen by divine providence. Jack was now in his mid-50s, and he was about to discover a true religion. Shuddermaw had always walked in the woods because he had always been potent and deadly, eternal. He walked there as he walked in all places, but he walked on unseen. He walked in a place that was as real as it was unknown and unsuspected. It was as real as the deeps of space or the floor of the ocean, under shadows in the empty spaces behind stones, in the void by the shoulders of trees. There walked Shuddermaw. Mostly he walked alone. For ages and ages he could be alone, patient. If should anything, floundering and helpless, dwell in the same place as he would move by, he would catch it and feed. He was always unsatisfied by this feeding, but he always took them. They were better than nothing. Shuddermaw once had many names. One of these was the Lord of Hunters. Many of the druids who knew all his names had disapproved of that one. They knew from the ancient wisdom that he was more truly the Lord of the moment of the kill. Shuddermaw was the living incarnation of the terror felt by all things that are caught, trapped, and pounced on and torn apart. Shuddermaw was he who makes them freeze in place. If the bucolic tangled green bank described by Darwin is a vicious battleground, then Shuddermaw was the soul of the pain and fear engendered. Shuddermaw, essence of terror, he who rustles on many legs in the darkness. There are many things people don't know. One of these is that the Celtic culture partly has its roots in a place long gone under the ocean. Many other human cultures have their origins there. It was a place called Lemuria. Very few, incredibly few, were the actual physical traces of that long-gone place. The greatest treasure of the Iceni tribe had been one of these. It was called the Golden Basin of Shuddermaw, made of gold mined under mountains long vanished beneath the waves. They had used it to make votive offerings to the Lord of the moment of the kill. The sacred basin was always kept buried, the sacrifices poured onto the ground above. For when it was buried under the earth, Shuddermaw had to stay in the other place. Where the relic was, there Shuddermaw would walk, unseen, as he walked everywhere. For the Iceni priests knew, if it was not kept always piled over with earth, then the essence of terror, he who rustles on many legs in the darkness, would once more walk abroad. He was not imprisoned. They worshipped him as they worshipped all of their many gods. When the time came, he would walk again in the world of men. Time meant nothing to Shuddermaw. The druids had all been taught as acolytes. When the warrior strikes with the sword, there is Shuddermaw. When you exalt sacrifice with a knife, there is Shuddermaw, brother of death. Long ago, the place where the gold basin was hidden had been forgotten. Jack had decided to take up metal detecting, not as a member of a club of obsessives. No thermoses and curling sandwiches for him, nor in a chancy, casual way. Now that he was in his mid-50s, he was, as he told his wife, going to systematically blitz it. He was going to get the best equipment and have a plan. Then, when he had done the gold dance, he was confident he would sell the gear, hopefully at a profit, then move on. He didn't think it would be healthy to get too hung up on it. There was a road nearby that followed the course of one of the old Roman ones. This was also intersected by ancient Drover's Way. In addition, there were 2 ruined castles and several manor houses nearby. On an Ordnance survey map, Jack marked out an area which included all these features. This he designated as his axis of investigation. Jack was clever and had chosen the area carefully because there were other things he had noticed. Although the geography was mostly so flat it looked ironed out, there was also a few low, raised ridges. From these it was impossible, because of the trees on them all nearby, to see the sea. But it might not always have been that way. Jack wanted his own Sutton Hoo. He wanted a ship burial. Life had made Jack an incorrigible optimist. The other thing was a pet theory he had quietly developed inside his axis of investigation. He highlighted specific areas. These were all at what he called boundary points, the edge of fields, outer edges of wooded areas, and such, especially woods. His equipment was the latest, top of the line. He would therefore be able to exploit these types of terrain, which would not have been explored before, either effectively or at all. He was thorough. Systematically, he got permission from landowners. He was at his most charming in his offhand, hard-to-put-your-finger-on kind of way. He didn't try too hard. He wasn't obsequious. Many of them came away from their encounters with him, feeling he had done them a favor. He also checked out the relevant laws and bylaws. It was late autumn, crops all in, ground hard, but not too hard. With his wife's slight amusement at what she called Jack's nerd phase, he took a week off work and got started. He was only 3 days in, and already he had done the gold dance. Just a few yards beyond a drainage ditch, up one of the promising low ridges, wooded over with old-growth, broadleaf trees, he got a good signal. He dug up a roughly made gold coin about twice the size of his thumbnail. It had a strange, highly stylized image of a horse roughly in the center and something that was either supposed to be a wheel or the sun just above this on the left. Jack had found an Iceni stater. He had been delighted, but he also knew it wasn't that unusual or rare. People found the Celtic tribes' coinage all the time. Apparently, some people had them on their keychains, and it was one coin, not a hoard. After proudly showing his wife, he emailed a friend stateside. Jack sometimes teased him by asking, "How are things Canada side?" who he knew was a fanatical history buff. Jack wrote, "We've no Native American burial grounds, but wait till I tell you what I found." His friend had been satisfyingly impressed and jealous, admitting this in his reply. Jack decided to spend the next day exploring the area more. You never knew. Jack had no way of knowing that the coin he had found was very special. The last human being to touch the coin had been a woman called Boudica. She had walked into the wood long ago when it was far larger, to the very edge of the holy place where the golden basin was buried in the earth. She had gone down on her knees and rubbed the coin over her raw, recently flogged back and cast it from her into the trees.
"Lord Shuddermaw!"
she had loudly cried out.
"Let the vengeance we take be remembered for all time. Let the horror of the deaths we deal out be legend. Do this for me and I will gladly give you mine and my men's lives."
Shuddermaw heard her prayer, and she had kept her word. Jack got an incredibly strong signal beside a huge moss-covered boulder. The place had never been under the plow because it was dotted with these. It had been chosen carefully. Whatever it was also seemed to be partly under a tree. He wasn't deterred for a moment. Long ago, he had devised a clever way of getting tree stumps out. It had often annoyed him when he bought new houses that there were often tree stumps left in so many gardens. He had imagined someone's Uncle Fred telling them, "I can take that tree down, no probs," back in 1987, and the stump being left in the ground as if it were a law of nature that it remain. His method was simple. One of those two-handed mallet things you got in a garden center. A couple of old SS spades. You dug a small hole beside the tree, then systematically whacked the tree stump all around the base. This broke some of the root system up. Then you put the saw in the hole and cut around. You used old saws so it didn't matter if you hit rocks. Vary the procedure and repeat. It was a good, strong signal. Oddly, a medium-sized tree. Knowing the type of ground, he'd come prepared. Everything he needed was in the back of the Land Rover. Unfortunately for Jack, he succeeded in getting the tree to topple over. By the time he was finished, he was pouring with sweat. He really enjoyed the physical labor. Endorphin rush, he supposed. He was also increasingly excited about what he was going to find. He trusted his instincts. He thought it was going to be good. Really good. He was right. Jack broke the rules and took it home. He had to. He felt compelled to. He reasoned, "This Jack isn't a do-boy. Me and the wife are going to have a good look at this. This blows Sutton Hoo out of the water. It will be going to a museum soon. Everyone will get to enjoy it. But we get a look first. A small naughty." He'd screamed with delight when he found it. Triumph! It was round and about the size of the basins most people have in the kitchen sink. The basin was made of high-quality, pure gold bullion. Solid gold. It was so heavy, it was a struggle to get it out of the hole, and Jack was a big man. Well over 2,500 years before, the distant ancestors of the Iceni had decorated its edge with a swirling, interlocking thick band of beautifully worked rose gold. This was so ancient that most of the copper had oxidized away. What was left showed through in a pattern of red smudges so vivid they almost looked blood red. The gold, of course, remained. The hold-fed effect made it look like lace that had been turned into golden fire. Jack and his wife had been washing off the dirt on the garage floor. Upon seeing this wonder, she whispered in an awe-filled voice.
"Almost 11.
He agreed. In the center of the basin was the true, deep, lustrous Lemurian gold. Within the deep cup, there were strange, pictorial figures laid out in a circle. They looked to Jack and his wife a bit like stickmen, but the ancient artist had been so skilled that they seemed to move. They seemed to be controlled with fear, with deft, indefinable touches. They appeared to cower away from the center. The bowl, which was smooth, shining, and somehow portentous in its emptiness. It was at once a wondrous and ominous thing. They left it in the living room. They were not worried about hiding it. The house had a good security system and was located in a nice rural area. On a sudden whimsy, Jack put some fruit in it. That night, they went out and celebrated. They went to an expensive restaurant. They were sensible and took a taxi there and back so they could both have a drink. Jack was going to put the basin back the next day where they had discovered it. They both imagined appearing on TV and in the papers. They were having a laugh about this when they got home. Jack pinched her and joked about how young she would look to everyone and about how jealous she would make the dads and lads. She pretended to slap his arm and giggled in mock indignation. When they turned on the living room light, what they saw was so inexplicable they almost couldn't see it for more than several moments. It did not compute. They could not comprehend. The room was not simply smashed, it was destroyed. The back wall was gone. Half the ceiling had fallen in, collapsed. Everything was wrecked. A cold night wind was blowing in. Bizarrely, the dangling light still worked. There was a huge something there. Something. Almost in the same instant, Jack's wife thought it was the huge wheel of an enormous heavy goods vehicle, whilst he thought of the blades you see inside a jet engine. Jack's mind cried out, "Air crash, crashed plane," but it wasn't. Shuddermaw uncurled himself. When he walks in the world, He has a body like a huge black and reddish centipede. Along most of his length, his legs move constantly. They made a rustling noise. His upper body is like a crocodile's back. His head is a huge round atrocity that calls to mind both a shark, a cat, and a human face. Shuddermaw has a spider's eyes. He has 2 long arms like tentacles. They sprout from his neck. These end in clawed but disturbingly human hands. Usually his hands are held together just under his chin, as if in prayer. He has a scorpion's tail. Lightly, tenderly, but too quick to see, he touched his tail to Jack and Jack's wife's necks, and they couldn't move. Shuddermaw took first the woman and then the man. He opened them and drained the blood into his golden bowl and drank. He has teeth like a shark. His huge tongue is disagreeably human. He licked his lips after he had fed. He was content. Time meaning nothing to him, he decided he would go back to his wood and back into the other place for a time. I hope you guys enjoyed this story as much as I did. I want to thank Stephen Sinclair for giving me permission to read it, as well as Morgan Goodman, who voiced Jack's wife, and Whispering Scream, who voiced the Iceni. I've put links to their content and/or channels down below. Stephen has many more works that will be readable soon once his book is published. And Whispering Scream has a fantastic YouTube where she also narrates scary stories. And Morgan has created some music that I've already used or will soon be using on future videos.